Okay. Imagine it's the late 1800s in London, England, and you're a middle aged woman walking the streets at night after a fun night out with your friends. All of a sudden, a man stops you. He mistakes you for a working girl and gives you a proposition. You decline, but he does not believe you. So he pulls you into an alley and you try to scream, but he has covered your mouth and there's no one around to hear you. The next thing you know, he has pulled out a knife and starts viciously attacking you, leaving you dead in the alley. This is typically how the murderer Jack the Ripper would kill his victims. Jack the Ripper terrorized the streets of London in the fall of 1880 and claimed at least 5 victims in a matter of months. To this day, Jack the Ripper has never been caught. And if you haven't guessed by now, today I will be telling you the story of Jack the Ripper. First, I will tell you the background information of London at the time, then who the victims are, the letters, and then finally the suspects. The website on History.com explains that in the late 1880s, East London was a place that was viewed by citizens with either compassion or other contempt. This means that you either loved it there or it was hated. The main town of the murders was actually a town called Whitechapel, and it was notorious for violence and crime. A common practice for women at this time was prostitution, and provided women with an easy way to make their money. The previously mentioned website, History.com, says that prostitution was only illegal at the time if it caused a public disturbance, meaning that it was legal, but it became illegal if people started fighting about it or the police got involved, then it was illegal. However, that does not mean it was respected in the community, and those who prostituted themselves were looked down upon by the rest of society for their immoral behavior. Thousands of low rented places, lodging and stuff like that, provided these types of services in the late 19th century. The same article on History.com states that women at this time would spend most of their days, working at home, being a typical housewife, whatever, household chores. But then at night, they would go out, have some fun, and sell themselves for the pleasure of men. According to Briticana.com, Jack the Ripper murdered 5 women, all prostitutes, in the little town of Whitechapel, London, throughout the months of August to November in 1888. So now that we have a little background information on the town of Whitechapel and what happened, let's learn about the victims and what really happened to them. The terror of Jack the Ripper all started on the night of August 31st when Mary Ann Nichols' body was found dead in an alley. According to jacktheripper.org, she was lying on her back, her legs were straight out, her skirt was raised almost over her waist, and her throat had been slashed savagely, that her head had actually almost been cut off from her body. When the police arrived, there was no evidence of who committed this crime. So unfortunately, couldn't catch the victim, kind of sad. On September 8th, the second victim, Annie Chapman, was found. She was a 47-year-old prostitute, and when the police found her body, they discovered a handkerchief tied around her throat, and the police said the murderer had used this handkerchief to keep the head from rolling away because he tried to cut her throat. The website History UK states that Annie Chapman's stomach was torn apart and a section of it laid on her shoulders. And finally, a part of her vagina and bladder had been removed and carved out. The next 2 victims' murders happened actually within 45 minutes of each other, according to History UK. Elizabeth Stride was the first one. She was a middle-aged prostitute, and her body was found first at 1 a.m. JackTheRipper.org states that the witnesses saw the body laying in an alley and noticed that she was also wearing a scarf. And it was pulled tightly around her neck, kind of the same way that Annie Chapman's was before. Her death was clearly conclusive, but believed that she was choked to death, so they don't really know exactly what happened, but the next body that was found was the body of Catherine Eddowes, age 43. JackTheRipper.org also states that Catherine Eddowes was lying dead in a pool of her own blood, and her clothes were thrown over her waist. The previously stated History UK says that her body was ripped open and her throat was slashed. Her eyelids were gone, non-existent, along with part of her nose was gone and her right ear. The uterus and left kidney were removed and thrown over her shoulder as well, and once again, there was no evidence of the murderer. The final victim was found dead on November 9th, and she went by the name of Mary Kelly, and she was only 25. In the article on JackTheRipper.org, it says that Mary Kelly was found on a bed. So hers is a little different. She wasn't found in the alley like everyone else. She was in a bed. But her uterus, kidney, and one of her breasts were found under her head. The other breast was found by her right foot, and her liver was in between her feet. The article also says that her face was gashed in all directions, the nose, cheeks, eyebrows, and eyes being partly removed, so they were attached, but they weren't. So once again, no evidence was left by the murderer, and we have no clue who this person is that has committed these crimes to these poor, innocent women that does not deserve to be killed. But now that we have discussed the victims of this famous murderer, it's time to find out what if there is any evidence left behind. Now, you're probably wondering if this killer left any evidence, how did they decide that his name was Jack the Ripper? Well, I'm going to tell you. On September 27th, a letter was actually sent to the Central News Agency, and according to History UK, the letter was a warning to the public that more murders were coming. This letter was well known as the Boss Letter. WhitechapelJack.com explains that this is the first letter was viewed as a joke, they believe this letter oh whatever, it's just a hoax, someone's just trying to scare us, But the letter quickly then gained attention after the death of Catherine Eddowes. WhitechapelJack.com also mentions that in the letter, the Boss Letter, the author states, clipping off his victim's ear, and guess what? Eddowes' ear was found missing.